Well, welcome everybody. Certainly nice to see you this morning. And I wanted to spend a few minutes with you, if you don't mind. We know that obviously, as a part of providing value to our clients, to the companies we work for, we need to always keep learning and keep developing. And so this little discussion was based on a question I get very often. In fact, I've had several people reach out to me just this week on LinkedIn and say, what should I do now? What's the training that I should take? What's the next step? Perhaps they've taken in the past a CISSP, and where do I go from here? And so we thought to put this together for you, maybe give you some ideas, things you can sort of look forward to, and so on as well. And certainly, as well, give us more opportunities, motivation, and so on as well. So several of you know me already, but my name's Kevin Henry, and I have, well, I just put CISSP here because I have, I don't know, Jens, you must have the same, well over 20 different certifications as well, and various ones. But my certifications primarily are in the areas of security management, audit, and business continuity. That's kind of where I've had most of my experience and so on. So I'm very fortunate to be a senior instructor at Readynez, but I've been involved in a lot of the courses we're going to talk about. I managed all education at IC² for over 10 years, and what was in the CISSP and SSCP exams and so on. And I've been involved a lot with the development of the CRISC materials, even wrote the actual student manual you get from ISACA, and CISA, CISM, quality assurance, and so on. So anyway, most of the certifications we're going to talk about here today are ones that I actually have. So the reason I kind of say this is to give a little bit of maybe credibility that I'm not just saying this from a sales type perspective or saying this from a perspective of theoretical, but I do actually, I've been involved in many cases in the work and even then the creation of many of these certifications as well. So there's my email address. Certainly, you can always reach out to me on that or LinkedIn and so on if you have questions as well. We're going to build on a foundation first of information security. Then we'll add on and go into the areas of audit, information systems management, talking about managing change, and certainly the new areas and challenges we face. But certainly, hopefully from this, give you some idea how to continue to develop your skills, and maybe you'll consider even Readynez as a training partner in that way. I personally encourage questions, and if you have something, don't be afraid to speak up. I can't actually see any chat box while I'm speaking here, so it's far better just to speak up, and I will try to address those right away. The idea, of course, is, as I said, most of what I'm going to say is based on my own experience, both with the certifications themselves and with the students that I've worked with over the past 20 years of this training and so on. But it's different for everybody. I learn differently than some people learn. I find some things simple and other things quite difficult. And I like to use this example, the Certified Information Security Manager, or CISM. For myself, who came out of a management background, and I'd come out of being a computer programmer, systems analyst, then I went into audit. And so when I sat for the CISSP, I had a lot of technical experience, but also a lot of managerial experience. Then when I went for the CISM, it was basically almost like I called it a free exam. I didn't have to do additional study because that was an area that I had a lot of experience in. But I know for some other people who even had a CISSP, they found the CISM to be really difficult. because their expertise had only been technical. And when CISM focused on the managerial side, that made it hard for them. So, we're all a bit different in that way. And of course, some people do better with exams than others too. But with a lot of these, it's good to keep learning and keep pushing ourselves, of course, and so that hopefully we become more well-rounded and of more value, and certainly as well. I wanted to start out here saying, first of all, let's set a foundation that we can build our careers on. And part of my goal, of course, today was also that many of the people who've signed up for this webinar now are actually also in positions of management. They're in a position where they have a team that works for them, and how can they develop that team as well is an important thing. And so a lot of my goal, of course, with this was not only for your own benefit, but also when your team comes and say, what training should I take? I remember in one case I was working, doing an audit. And in this case, I talked to the manager and I said, the manager, like, your staff needs some training. They don't even know some of the things they need to know. And he says, well, I'll gladly give them training, but they're not asking for it. And the reason they weren't asking for it is they didn't even know what to ask for. And so as managers, sometimes we have to actually plan and help our teams develop a training path as well. So they're getting because a person doesn't know what they don't know. And I find it often, we see this when especially we're talking about something like software development. If we're going to do secure software development, and we wonder why maybe some of our developers don't have good software development experience, and they do have good experience, but they don't have a security knowledge that's built into that. It's because it was never in any courses they took. And they don't realize what the security needs of software development are. And they don't realize they're lacking that knowledge in many cases. So a lot of our goal here has to be trying to make sure that everybody is aware of what security is. Now, some people say, well, if I do that, then I turn them into hackers. Well, no. The point, of course, is that if a person knows what the threat is, they can be more careful. They also have to know what are their responsibilities as far as everything about process and making sure that, I often say it this way, information security is not a technology. It's a process, it's a culture of how we do things. And what we have to work with our staff is that our staff knows that security is not the responsibility of another department. It's the responsibility of each person. It's when I do something for my job, I do it in a secure way. And so in many ways, the foundational knowledge is to know what are the hazards that are out there and what is my responsibility of what I should do so that I help secure my organization. And in many cases, people fear things they don't understand. And we often use terminology and so on that, I've had in some of my classes people that are gray-haired asking, what's a DMZ? What's a demilitarized zone? Because we use acronyms and terminology that for us are as natural as breathing. But to maybe a lot of other people in the organization, they're thinking of some minefield between North and South Korea. And so therefore, we need to communicate better. If people understand something, then often it removes some of that apprehension or fear they can have as well. So a lot of our work is to start so that there's a fabric of knowledge that the organization is then built on. So it's good to have, first of all, just general knowledge. General courses on information security to explain what is security. The idea is that if I can convince somebody of what security is and why it's important, that will influence their behaviors. Because a person's behavior is driven by their beliefs. And if they believe something is good, they usually would do it. If they believe it's bad, maybe they don't. But if I try to tell somebody to do something, but they don't have any belief that that's a good thing or that it matters, yeah, we see a lot these days. We can tell people these are the rules. And some people follow those, and some people turn around and say, no, I don't think that's right. And they don't, because they don't believe that that is the right thing for them to do. So what do we need to do? Convince, persuade, and in some cases, try to change the belief system of our staff. So going back to that example of a software developer should see my job is to be secure. That's a part of my responsibility. And in that way, hopefully, what we're actually going to do with this is we are going to change the way they do things. The other thing we do is when people know policies and they know procedures, we create ownership. Now it's a part of my responsibility. Now that I know that's what I'm supposed to do, there's much more we can say here. That whole idea that, yeah, it is my problem. It is something I have to do. So we create in that way ownership. So it's good to provide security awareness to all staff, contractors, temporary employees, and it should be something which is frequent, something which is on a regular basis, not just once a year, but once a year is better than never. But I've worked at a number of locations that were of high risk. And one of the things I liked about many of those locations is the moment we came on site, we had to take safety briefings and so on, and nobody was allowed to go on that site. Didn't matter if you're coming to meet with the CEO. You had to go through a security and a safety briefing before you're allowed past the receptionist desk. And so that's something we should do with all of our staff, that they receive an onboarding process that makes sure they're familiar with how do we do security at our company. And we should, of course, repeat that on a regular basis, but also talk about the things that are up to date and matter today. It's talking about ransomware, talking about default passwords. And of course, a lot of this is using examples to make it interesting, make it so that people can say, yeah, I can understand why that's important. And it's important we communicate so they know our policies and procedures as well. Now, there's one certification I really like for this, and that is from the British Computing Society, their CISMP. And the reason I really like this is because it was put together as a great foundational knowledge that I think all staff should have. Well, I won't say all, let's say most, because security awareness should be given to all staff, which include everything, including people that are nice enough to clean the office. They should know good security practices, lock the doors, and so on. But the CISMP was really developed so people could have a foundational level of useful information. The things that are practical and relevant for everybody. So that it's a really good certification that I would love to see more and more people take. And the idea behind it being that if everybody is aware of it and aware of the needs of information security, we build this fabric across the organization, which is going to help us to have that really good enterprise-wide foundational knowledge. And one of the things I really like about the CISMP is it explains what is security, but without getting into all those technical details that people's eyes begin to glaze over and they say, yeah, but this isn't something that, again, they don't understand, they don't think is relevant for them, and so on as well. But there's another certification that comes after that, and that's from CompTIA, the Security Plus. This is one that should be given to all IT staff, whereas the CISMP should be given to everybody in the organization. I don't care if they have a C in front of their name or if they're a person that is working in some type of clerical job. It's important for everybody. Sec Plus should be a requirement for all IT staff. It's a really good, slightly more advanced level of foundational knowledge for developers, administrators, anyone who's working in system operations, project managers. And the reason I like this one as the next step is because we do get into more of the technical stuff. We get into a little bit of what is access control, which is something not really dealt with in depth with the CISMP. And Security Plus is it's a really good, fair exam. I think it tests on things that everyone in IT would have to say, yeah, it's good that I know that, even if they don't want to consider security as a part of their job, shall we say. But I had to laugh at that. I still think there's 2 questions on the exam that were wrong, because those were the only 2 questions I got wrong on the exam, but it was one of those ones that you sort of look at and say, yeah, okay, it's debatable. Anyway, then let's start from that foundation, start moving into different areas. And the first area I wanted to go into was the area of audit. This is an important area, the CISA, Certified Information Systems Auditor. And one of the reasons this certification is important is because we have today a lot of auditors that came out of a financial background, they came out of a different area, but not technical. And so the CISA gives a good foundational knowledge of information systems, because an auditor is only going to be able to provide good value if they know what they're looking at. And so CISA does a good job of that. In fact, it's really, I would say, essential for all information systems auditors. I put in here it's the only, and there is another out there from the IAAA, the Certified Internal Auditor, which is a good one, but again, that is meant for internal audit specifically. But CISA is a really good also addition to people that have the CISM or CISSP. And the reason is that CISM and CISSP look at security management. How do I manage a security program? How do I create policies and design and implement and operate controls? Where CISA, the CISA is the one who comes in and assesses or evaluates those policies and those controls. So it's very good to have kind of that additional perspective. If I'm an information security manager as a CISM or CISSP, how am I going to be assessed? And so it's the idea of being better at being a security manager by knowing the approach of audit. And so it's a very good certification. It's one I think that is a good complement or addition even if you're not an auditor as such. I like audit because audit often gives us a chance to look at something and say, how could we do it better? And I think that's an important part of what we're trying to do in today's world as well. Not just to maintain where we are, but to do it better. So CISA looks at things such as audit planning, risk, how to report to management, as well as things how to assess operations. A big part of it is actually the review of the governance of the IT project. And how are we looking at things such as, or IT program, I should say, how are we looking at budget and staffing and business case, cost benefit analysis, and certainly asset protection. But based on that, there are a couple of very good, valuable certifications as well. You take, for example, in the ISO series. Now, the thing is about an ISO document, it's a document. And it documents a certain process or a certain level of knowledge. And ISO 27001, lead auditor, lead implementer, as well as the other ISO type certifications, 22301 and so on, mean that you will have a good knowledge of that document. And since this document, especially 27001, which specifies and describes the information security management system, it's authoritative, it's used as the framework or benchmark for many organizations. So it's a really good document to know well. And what this does is it takes you through and says, do you understand what's in the document and how to apply it? So most of the questions for these are based on essays. Here's a situation, referencing 27001, how would you apply your knowledge in this situation? And that requires you to have a good understanding of that document. It's open book, because you have the document beside you when you do the exam. But it means that you know not only what the document says, but how to use what's in it. So some very good value in that, valuable knowledge, as I say. The next is the idea of the SSCP, and this is a certification that hasn't really taken off too well. We actually see CompTIA Security Plus is coming into this area as Security Plus is getting to be a better actually certification over the last few years too. But the SSCP was put out by ISE² specifically to deal with those people that have only worked in information security for a year. They don't have the managerial experience, they're working as a security officer, and so therefore, what do they need to know in order to do their job? And I've often said it's also a very good certification for people that don't have security in their job title. And what I mean by that, system administrators, network administrators, database administrators, these types of people that have to have an understanding of how to integrate security into their jobs. And that's where the SSCP does have some very good value there. It's an underrated certification, but it also, we have many people that sit today and say, for example, a CISSP, that really should have sat for the SSCP. That would be more valuable or more practical for their level of knowledge they currently have. It's more about the application of knowledge and without the analysis that's required for a CISSP. And it's something that many people actually could then pass, because it's more suited for that person with 1 year of experience. So it's one that I wish more IT departments would put their staff through. the SEC Plus, the SSCP, even if they're never going to really become security managers and so on. And this is the area that I'm not the specialist in. I have several of these certifications, but certainly not all of them. But this is where we have Jens with us as well tonight, and because this really is the area of the technical roadmap, excellent courses, often with very good technical components. CompTIA, EC Council, SANS, right up to one I have a lot of respect for, the OSCP. And a lot of these take us through labs and hands-on exercises and that are really good for the people that are the practitioners that are doing the job every day, and give some very good knowledge in that. And I'm really hoping that Jens is going to do a little webinar like this that specifically looks at these technical courses as well, and gives us sort of, for the people that are going, like I tend to go more towards the management and audit side. Jens, he's a specialist in this, and hopefully awakens the interest of those people that would like these types of courses as well, and penetration testing, for example, and so on. Then you've got a lot of vendor-specific courses, and some of these, certainly are incredibly important these days. You take cloud. What is it? Over 65% of companies have now adopted a cloud-first strategy. The idea that we're going to go to the cloud, so we need then people within IT that understand cloud architecture, and understand cloud implementations, migrations, and whether or not it's Amazon or Azure. There's so many very good courses in this that will take us through what is the security and the technical elements I need to know as we move towards a cloud-based implementation. And again, so people have that awareness they need. And there's, of course, in this area as well, a number of good architecture courses as well. TOGAF, for example, the Open Group Architectural Framework, very good to make sure that we understand before we start doing something, we should have a design, we should have a plan for it. We, of course, need to be able to manage the equipment we have, and this is where many companies fall down. They have bought equipment, but they don't have trained staff on how to use that equipment effectively. And I had 2 companies come to me within 1 week a while ago and say, would you give us a course on log analysis? We have SIMs we're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on, and we don't have a single person on our staff that knows how to really use the data generated by that security information event management system effectively. And if we look at some of the companies that have had major breaches, it's a little older one now, but Target, for example, Target had a SIM. It told them that they had a breach the very first day, but their staff didn't know how to respond or know what to do with that. And so there's a lot of this when it comes to firewalls and SIMs that we see technology, very expensive technology that sits there and doesn't really provide a lot of value to its companies. And so these are things that we have to make sure, because maybe when we first put the system in, we trained a couple of people. But how is it now a few years later? We find that those people have moved on, and the people managing the systems every day now actually don't have that knowledge they need to have. So it's where we have to go back and review with our teams. Do we have the people to manage our technology effectively? Now, we talked a bit about the cloud, and from the perspective of Amazon and Azure, we definitely want to take those vendor-specific courses. But one that's really good to take as well is from ISE², and that is the CCSP, the Certified Cloud Security Professional. It's a lot of overlap with the CISSP. You have to know information security. That's the core. Securing the cloud is really, in the most cases, just the application of security knowledge, but now in a cloud world. So it's knowing the knowledge first is a really good first step. And we see that people that have the CISSP do very well with the CCSP. You don't have to have the CISSP first, but I would really encourage, if a person is going to sit for the CCSP, maybe they should have sat for the SEC Plus at least first. Get that core information security knowledge, and then when it comes to applying security to the cloud, they're going to have much more of an advantage in that way of being able to just understand the cloud specific areas, not have to understand foundational, should say, security knowledge. We mentioned a moment ago about architecture, and certainly architecture is important. We have a lack of good architects these days. And I'm not saying we have a lack of architects, we have a lack of good architects. And this hurts a lot of companies because many people that even are architects spend more time as project managers than they really do in true, pure architecture, which is planning, understanding the requirements, trying to find what is the right solution for those, should we say, business requirements. And so some of the very good programs related to that, TOGAF, the Open Group Architectural Framework, start with the top, work your way down so that what we build in the end was based on those high-level understandings of what we needed. And the work of John Sherwood, I would encourage everybody to sit for the SABSA certified framework and SCF. It's a course I really liked myself. In fact, I helped write some of the advanced SABSA courses. But the idea of SABSA was about how do I integrate security into the business? And so that it's not that we're going to take the business and integrate it into security. No, it's understanding the business first. And the whole book on this, based on enterprise security architecture, is to be able to understand how to build a security framework that goes right across the enterprise. And some very good value, of course, in that and so on as well. So, and then you have the CISM out of ISACA, designed for security managers, and is really the ideal certification for someone who is now an information security manager that doesn't know the difference between TCP and UDP. It's really good for managers that don't have a technical background, and we see this a lot today. We have people that are CIOs, we have people that are CISOs that have come out of other areas of the company. They didn't come out of networking. They didn't come out of systems development. And the CISM is the one they can pass. It's a very good, comprehensive knowledge of the management of information security, but without sort of the technical, shall you say, balance to it that would be required if they were to sit for the CISSP. The CISSP, we know that's pretty much the gold standard in information security management. That we almost today is, we say here, the minimum needed for security professionals. If you're going to work in this field of information security, you really have to have the CISSP. But it's difficult for some people that don't have a technical background. And so that's why I've encouraged some people that have struggled with the CISSP, go to the CISM. That's where your strength is. Your strength is in policy and risk management, and you can pass the CISM. And most HR departments see this CISSP and the CISM as more or less equal. Yeah, you have one or the other, that's fine. If we're hiring an information security manager, we'll take either one. But in the area of the CISSP is a wider coverage. You have a good balance of technical areas, and the CISSP and CISM exams are both equally difficult. You have to know the subject, and they're all based on analysis and the application of that knowledge you have. So very good value in that, and certainly the goal behind this in many cases is that a person who has sat for the CISSP, they've demonstrated a wide range of knowledge, essential to be able to providing good value and leadership in the security area. Then a number of years ago, myself and Dave Bonnewell and Tony Barata, we sat down and developed a couple of concentrations. We took, because people said, what do I do after the CISSP? So then we took the CISSP content and we split it in half. We said, what part of the CISSP is mostly managerial? And that will become the Information Systems Security Management Professional. And what part of the CISSP is then mostly technical? And that'll become the Information Systems Security Architecture Professional. Now, that's kind of misnamed because it's not strictly an architecture course. It's more about taking the technical content of the CISSP and going 2 levels deeper into knowledge in the technical management areas. And so the ISSAP and ISSMP are very good, should you say, more in-depth areas of knowledge than just was needed for the CISSP. The pass rate on those exams has often been down in the low 40s, 42% and so on, because they are tough exams. But what does it do? It shows a person who has gone beyond just that, should you say, level of the CISSP. So that's where those came from. As I said, we developed those years ago. As another step after the CISSP. And so that's what they were intended to do. We also have to be aware of there's so many new technologies coming out and new areas we've got to know about. Because the IT department in many companies looks after IT. But we have many things in most companies today that are attaching to our networks that are not managed by the IT department. But they still become very much a part of our job as information security professionals. Internet of Things, supervisory control and data acquisition systems, industrial control systems, building management systems. We take US CERT put out a report. 2 companies in 1 week were compromised because they put a refrigerator into the coffee area. And that refrigerator was wheeled in by facilities management, plugged in. And the first thing that it asked for, could I have then a network connection? So it can go back to the vendor and say if there's a problem and the filters need to be changed for the ice machine or something. Well, the challenge with that was then connected without the IT department's knowledge, and certainly without anyone going back and saying, is there a security risk with this? And 2 companies were breached because they put a refrigerator into the coffee area. So as far as information security goes, we actually have to go far beyond what is traditional IT, because these things are becoming side entrances into our systems. These systems that used to work on dedicated, should we say, types of connections are now becoming a part of the overall network of the company. And so we have to worry about things such as, obviously, What type of endpoint devices are connecting to our networks today? And we need to keep learning in these areas because this is becoming a very wide and very vulnerable attack surface to attackers today. So when it comes to education, obviously, I love it. It's the sort of idea to keep learning, keep developing. And as I like how one person said, if you're green, you're still growing. Once you're ripe, you begin to rot. And so we need to always be pushing ourselves to what are the new technologies, what are the new threats, and not only for ourselves to show leadership, but also to encourage our staff to continue to develop their skills. The world is changing, and we are going to have the skills necessary to be able to work in that new world. So it's important for us that are in a management role to actually encourage all of our staff to take some regular training. Now, the one thing that we've talked mostly here about certifications, and one of the reasons that this is a good idea, I know I said I got 20 some certifications. I don't really like certifications because a certification doesn't necessarily mean somebody's good at their job. But we often need an exam so that people are paying attention and they're focused. Because if they know that at the end there's a test they have to pass, they're going to put that effort into it that is necessary. And that's one of the reasons why our boot camp style has always been so good, because it isolates, it allows people to dig in and be able to focus. So at the end of the week, it's not just that they did a brain dump of what they could remember until exam day, but they've actually hopefully been able to absorb, and now they know that information and can pass the exam at the end. What does this do? It makes them more valuable to their employers or future employers. It also allows them to be able to provide. I really enjoyed when I was working on my MBA, for example, that it gave me a perspective of why we do what we do. So that now when we're going and doing something, we understand sort of the background, that knowledge that was necessary as well. So it increases our value when we are in a meeting, a project meeting, and somebody says, what do you think? Well, we actually hopefully have something worthwhile to say. Obviously, we have to keep current, and for a lot of people are taking courses as well because it can help them to maintain the certifications they have through things like continuing professional education credits or professional development, whatever your certification calls them. So it's sometimes important to do that, and just to keep on top of these areas and so on as well. As far as it goes, of course, with us at Readynez, we're passionate about this. We're here to help you with your training needs and the needs of your staff. And one of the areas that is always best is when an organization has a custom class. They can train their whole staff or a large portion of their staff at once, and in a far more cost-effective way than individual courses in many cases. Save a lot on travel costs and so on, as well as quite often with a custom class, the value you get is that it can be designed specifically for that work group and what are their challenges and their policies and procedures. And of course, I love instructor-led. It's always great to have that interaction with people and hear their questions, be able to network, and in many cases, the students learn a lot from each other and the discussions they have. And of course, in today's world, we've gone a lot towards virtual, and we'll probably continue doing some of that, making that available, and that's a good thing. it's not as good as a classroom, of course, but we have to adapt to the world we're in. And the reason it's not as good as a classroom is partially because you're not distraction free like we are when we're delivering our courses in our boot camp style. And you don't get as much networking. You don't get as much in a virtual classroom of just people standing around having their fika or having their snack and discussing and asking each other questions and so on as well. So, but hopefully we'll get back into the classroom again someday. Well, of course, we'll see how that goes and deal with that at the time. As far as the sales side of it, we'd love to be your training partner. We have a team of instructors. You know, Jens is a fantastic, especially in the technical areas, and Julian and Frederick and the others we have that are all passionate about. We're not just there for a job. We're passionate about education and that our people actually get value out of the classes they're in. And one of the great things is the opportunity it often gives. And this is where I had a class a little while ago. I had a woman in the class who had flown in from Los Angeles. And when we did the introductions on Sunday evening, she'd said, yeah, she'd flown in because she knew she could get a better class with us than she could back in the US. And she was there on her own, paid her own way because she wanted to get value. And at the end, she passed a very tough examination, the CISSP, went back and immediately got a job for $40,000 a year more. And you think that is really someone who took a huge risk. But that, of course, is the value they see in being able to improve themselves and actually give themselves more opportunity and so on as well. Anyway, if you have any questions or comments, please speak up. Certainly, we're glad you could join us here today. And certainly when you want to take the next step in your educational journey, you know where to find us, readynez.com or email info@Readynez. So, any questions you have?
Hi, Kevin. Hi, Kevin. This is Sean.
Hi, Sean.
I just have got one question. You mentioned about the emerging technologies like IoT and SCADA. Just for example, if you pick IoT, are there any certifications specific to IoT which you recommend?
There are ones in development. It's not mature yet. The one problem we have is that very often things can become a vendor specific, which is good for that vendor product. But as a general certification, there's none yet that I would say were authoritative and as independent as they could be. We see NIST, for example, has come up with some very good standards how to harden various types of systems. We probably need to get more of those, but it's where we have a little bit of a gap right now, and that the maturity of those hasn't come to where I'd like to see them.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question about the master classes that are running over the coming weeks. So with these half and 1 day master classes, will they be taking a section right out of the course, or will they be a condensed version of the course?
Okay, very good question. And I think these master classes are a great little opportunity for us, and I'm glad we can do them. The main thing that we try to do, and especially Jens, you can speak up on this as well, is that we actually try to address an area that we can go more in depth that's not covered in the course. So that we can go into an area and say, look, in the course, we teach you more of a general high level, but here we can go more in depth into that. And so there's a value that goes far beyond what you would get in a normal class. The other is the ones I'm doing are going more into the areas of, okay, this is an overview of what's in this for the people that are interested, and certainly in what is the ISSAP and MP. And so mine are more based on specifically the certifications themselves, whereas Jens and Julian are doing ones that are more in the area of, okay, here's additional knowledge.
Okay. I had a general question as well for students taking the courses. What kind of support can students expect after the training course and in the run-up to their exam, if they maybe plan to do that a little later down the line?
Yeah, fantastic question. We at Readynez, our goal is always to build a training partnership and a relationship. And I have many students, especially in the last few weeks now, that have continuously come to me on LinkedIn. Here's a question, or they send me an email, and I'm studying for this. What do you recommend? Or I'm doing a risk assessment. Which methodology would you recommend? We very much encourage that people continue to use us as a resource in that way. And one of the things that also I think that's valuable is that for some of these, there are additional references that we can point a person to that obviously we can't read those in the class and go through them in depth, but at least we can point them to here's where to now to dig into it, to areas that you need more experience in as well.
Wonderful, thank you.
What is, the whole point is here, not just to get a certification. You can get certifications, you pay enough people to sit for the exam for you, which is unfortunate. But the point is that if people really learn something, that's of value. And to me, that's an important part. Any other questions or comments? Jens, did you want to say something about your courses as well? Okay, well, thank you all for your time, taking the time to join us for this webinar. I hope you found something of value in it, and hopefully you get some of the passion to keep learning and developing as well. And so that hopefully you see a place that you can continuously improve, and certainly, hopefully, enjoy the opportunities that are ahead of you in life and so on as well. To all of you, keep safe, keep healthy, and hopefully we'll see you in a class again sometime soon.
Thank
you so much.
Kevin.
Thanks, Kevin.